Hello, welcome back. The gospel community is heartbroken as it mourns the loss of a spiritual giant. At 92, Mama Mosie Burks, the fire-filled soul and unmistakable voice behind the Mississippi Mass Choir, has passed away, and though her time on earth has ended, her story is far from over. In her final days, something sacred unfolded, something that shook even the most seasoned worshippers. The tribute that followed her passing wasn't merely a ceremony, it became a divine moment that etched itself into gospel history. Mosie Burks wasn't just a name, and she wasn't just a singer, she was an encounter. Born in 1931 in the depths of Mississippi, her life was marked by perseverance, struggle, and unwavering faith. Raised in a large church-going family, she learned early that her voice wasn't just for entertainment, it was ministry. A deep, resonating sound that cut through the noise of life and ushered people into the presence of God. She was singing before she ever stepped onto a formal stage, already ministering to those around her through her voice during Sunday services. Her gift wasn't something that needed refining, it came heaven-sent, pure, and powerful. But it was in the late 1980s that the world truly got to witness her greatness. When Frank Williams brought the Mississippi Mass Choir together, Mosie quickly became a centerpiece. Her powerful renditions of gospel staples didn't just stir crowds, they brought deliverance. Songs like When I Rose This Morning and God's Been Good to Me became unforgettable moments in gospel history because of the way she poured herself into each note. She was a woman on fire for God, and you could feel it with every breath she sang. Into her 80s and even past 90, she never stopped singing, never stopped serving, never stopped giving. The hats, the smile, the voice, it was all part of a divine package that kept going, no matter the physical toll. But the end, though quiet, was full of grace. Though she remained spirited, her body began to slow. There were whispers of fatigue, pain, and an unspoken preparation. Those closest to her noticed a change. She wasn't traveling as much, staying closer to home, but her spirit remained unshaken. Even when she couldn't walk long distances, she would sit and sing, lifting her hands, her eyes closed, and her voice still able to bring down the heavens. She often mentioned getting her house in order, not in fear, but in peace. She knew where she was headed, and she welcomed it. One deeply touching moment came in the final weeks of her life when some choir members visited her home. She asked them to sing near the cross, and as the harmonies filled her living room, she joined in softly and tearfully. When they finished, she said, "That's how I want to go out, with a song in my soul." And soon after, she did, quietly, peacefully, and surrounded by love. No dramatic farewells, no cameras, just prayer, presence, and the same faith that had carried her all those years. The official word came a few days later. The Mississippi Mass Choir shared the news, with heavy hearts, calling her their mother, sister in Christ, and the heartbeat of their ministry. Tributes flowed from across the country. Gospel greats like Shirley Caesar, Kirk Franklin, Yolanda Adams, and Donnie McClurkin mourned the loss, each remembering the strength and joy she carried with her voice. But nothing could prepare the world for what happened at her funeral, held at New Hope Baptist Church in Jackson, Mississippi. The service was unlike anything the community had seen. People began arriving hours early, standing in long lines, some crying before the doors even opened. Inside, her white and gold casket stood with elegance, surrounded by beautiful flowers. Her trademark church hat was displayed beside it, a symbol of her identity and legacy. But when the choir began to sing without instruments, just voices, something spiritual happened. They sang When I Rose This Morning, and the sanctuary filled with such a powerful presence that it became impossible to remain seated. People shouted, wept, lifted their hands, overwhelmed by the glory in the room. Shirley Caesar gave a powerful eulogy, calling her a fearless soldier of the Lord. Marvin Sapp said she didn't just sing gospel, she embodied it. Then came a video montage of her life, her joy, her dances, her moments of deep praise. As her voice echoed through the speakers one final time, people couldn't hold back their emotions. Some were sobbing, others clapping along, and many stood in silence, overcome by the Spirit. But the most breathtaking moment came when the choir invited the entire church to sing "I'll Fly Away." What followed was not just a song, it was a mighty sound of triumph. The entire building shook with praise. People danced in the aisles, cried openly, and gave thanks for the life of someone who had led so many into worship. When the final note was sung, the room erupted into a standing ovation. Not for performance, but for a life lived with conviction and power. But what remains more powerful than any service or tribute is the legacy Mama Mosie left behind. Her death wasn't the end of her ministry, it became the beginning of a new wave of spiritual awakening. Her songs returned to the charts. Her performances were shared like treasures. Churches began dedicating services in her honor, and young artists started reflecting on her influence. Tamala Mann, Leandria Johnson, Jonathan McReynolds, these newer voices of gospel, acknowledged her as a foundational pillar. Her way of ministering, pure, unfiltered, and anointed, became the gold standard. And that's what Mama Mosie did, even in death. She continued to heal, to teach, to inspire. Her voice, though no longer on earth, is now eternal in its reach. Every time someone presses play on one of her songs, every time a choir sings her arrangements, every time a worshiper lifts their voice in the face of sorrow, she lives again. Mama Mosie Burks may have left this world quietly, but the echoes of her life will thunder for generations. And as long as there are people willing to lift their voices and keep singing, her legacy will never be silenced.